What's going on, guys? It's Hacks. I decided to throw together a tier list video, mostly because I feel like the tier list for Melee changes so frequently. I'm always putting out new tier lists on Twitter, and sometimes people like them, sometimes people hate them. But the point is, I'm always brainstorming the tier list for this game because it changes from month to month, honestly, as the metagame continues to evolve. So, we got a new tier list couple of months ago, but the thing about this tier list is that it's really about a year old, because they even tell you here that the data for this tier list was actually compiled around the time of like Genesis 7. So this one's kind of outdated, but I'll start by talking about this 12th tier list, which came out at the end of 2015. This tier list for its time was okay. I heavily influenced the Captain Falcon placement. I don't think he should have been below Ice Climbers in retrospect, but I influenced Captain Falcon's politics a lot back then. Like, I used to complain a lot about this character and really downplay him, and I'm very much so the opposite nowadays with Fox, where I almost like overplay this character. But back then, I guess I was younger and I didn't take losses as well, so I really used to downplay this character, and I think that is what got him placed below Ice Climbers on this list, because I don't think he should have been below Ice Climbers. But that being said, there is a key difference between this time period and this time period, and I'm not talking about the metagame necessarily, I'm talking about the actual game that we play, like on a software level. UCF came out between the 12th tier list and the 13th tier list, and UCF did not benefit all characters equally. UCF specifically benefited characters like Marth and Captain Falcon more than the others, because 100% dashback was not a thing on vanilla, and when these characters failed their dashbacks, they actually lag for 6 frames, whereas most of the other characters lag for 4, like Fox, Falco, and Chic. Those characters lag for 4. Peach lags for 6 if she fails it. However, she doesn't dash back as much, so she doesn't get as much out of UCF as Marth and Falcon. So that's an actual argument for why those characters have gotten better since this 2015 tier list. Other than that, the other main problem that I see with this 2015 tier list is that Yoshi's very underrated here. The thing I like about the newer tier list, this one, is that it correctly identifies the top 11 characters. Like, these 11 down to Samus, those are definitely the 11 best characters in the game. And then once you get to this tier, like B-, those characters really aren't playable anymore. Like, Luigi's not really a tournament viable character at all anymore. There's just no real merit to picking him. But, yeah, so that's one thing that's better about this newer one, is that it correctly identifies Yoshi as top 11, and then it gives that breakpoint right here where it shows that, Luigi and the others are clearly worse. That being said, a lot has changed since since the data for this tier list was put together. Because like I said, this tier list is like a year older than they really tell you. So really there's like a 4-year gap between these two lists, because this one is late 2015 and this one's like early 2020. There are definitely some glaring problems with this list that I want to point out. So I'm gonna throw together a new list for you. And we've had Slippi come out since then. The level of play has gone up a lot, despite the fact that we haven't had tournaments. I think the game has changed quite a lot. I think characters that benefit from high peaks have gotten better, and then the argument that like certain characters are good in an environment where the level of play isn't that high, those characters have gotten worse, because I feel like that's just starting to fade away with how accessible the game is nowadays. So I'm gonna throw together a new tier list for you guys, and I'm only going to rank these top 11 characters, because I don't really think these are worth talking about. I wouldn't really know how to rank them too well, honestly, just because nobody plays them really. So I always just knew my tier list with these top 11 characters. So, yeah, with that being said, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody that I'm going to put Fox in the rank 1 position. The reason I'm starting out with the S tier for this tier list, and then I'm building from there, is because my tier list is going to place a high emphasis on how the characters perform against the S tier characters. Like, by far, it matters more that you do well against these characters, because in principle they should be the most common. They should be the most common characters. So if your character loses matchups elsewhere, that's not as bad as like losing to these S tiers, because these are basically the ones that dominate the metagame. So I put Fox in the rank 1 position. I don't think Fox loses any matchups except for Marth on FD specifically. I think that's the only character plus stage combination that he loses to Marth. I think other than that, he goes mostly even with Marth, and I think he has 55% winning matchup on a couple of stages. So I think the matchup overall is roughly even. I do think the legality of FD as a stage is questionable. Like, I think if you take away FD, then Fox is like there's no way he loses the matchup at that point. But even under the current rule set, I think the matchup is even. So I've got Fox in the rank 1 position because I don't think he loses any matchups, and I think he has a generally favorable spread. So he's never going to fall out of a top 2 spot. The only argument you could ever make for another character being better than Fox is Marth, because that's the only character in the game, I think, that you could rationally argue could beat Fox. Again, I don't think he does, but I'll acknowledge that he's the only one you could argue this for. So I'm going to put Marth in the 2nd position, because I do think he has the best Fox matchup in the game. However, he's not nearly as oppressive as Fox into the rest of the cast. He is oppressive versus like Peach, Jigglypuff, Samus. He's oppressive versus characters like those. Like, those characters are like at least 40-60 versus Marth. But other than that, he's not as strong as Fox is versus the characters that I'm going to put in the A tier specifically, and that's like what solidifies Fox as the best character in the game, in my opinion. But Marth gets the 2nd spot because he is the main thing keeping Fox in check within this game, I would say. After that, I have Falco. Falco, I'll be honest, Falco doesn't really beat anyone by like a notable margin, except for maybe Captain Falcon. Like, he doesn't beat any of like the characters that are going to be highest on this list by like a good margin other than Falcon. But the reason Falco still makes it here is because he holds his own very well. Like, Falco definitely does not lose any matchup by worse than 45-55, which means he's completely solo mainable. Like, there's no way Falco loses any matchup by 4-6. So that means he's completely solo mainable. There's no matchup where you're going to be telling yourself that Falco's not a viable pick. He's definitely, like, overall less oppressive than Fox is, but he holds his own extremely well, and he's arguably better than Fox at certain matchups and character plus stage combinations. Like, I'm pretty sure Falco is better versus Marth on FD than Fox is because of how good Laser becomes on that stage, and I'm pretty sure Falco's better against Captain Falcon than Fox is. Those are the two that stand out to me. Fox is probably better in every single other matchup, or at least like equal, but Falco does have some things going for him above Fox. So I think overall, this is the last character in the game where there's no way he doesn't lose any matchups by more than 4-6. So he gets an S tier spot. The next character, this may shock you. I'm actually going to give the 4th spot to Captain Falcon. So Captain Falcon, if you go back to these tier lists, has only gone up. 2 tier lists ago, he was 8th. But like I said, a lot has changed since then. Not only have the players that use him really like redefined him, but UCF made him a lot better. So going into the 2nd tier list, he moves up to 6. But this tier list has some glaring problems. Like I said, I'm going to talk about like the Jigglypuff problem. Like, Jigglypuff should not be this high. This is actually a big part of the reason that I'm making this new tier list. Jigglypuff's definitely gotten a lot worse. So Falcon's gone up in that regard. Then from there, the main point to be debated is the Falcon versus Chic placement. I'll explain why I actually think Falcon's a better character than Chic right now. So, like I said, the main thing that I'm looking at in terms of this tier list placement is how well the characters do versus the S tier. But specifically within the S tier, it's most important that you do well versus Fox. It's second most important that you do well versus Marth. And it's third most important that you do well versus Falco. So when I look at Captain Falcon and Chic, Falcon is better into Fox and Chic is better into Falco. And then in my opinion, they're both like 50-50 into Marth. Like they're both the same into Marth, but Falcon is better into Fox and Chic is better into Falco. And the reason that's the case is because Falcon's niche is better equipped for dealing with Fox. And by niche, I'm referring to his movement speed. So Falcon is the only character in the game that can actually outrun Fox. And that's valuable because that means you can do things like dash back, and Fox actually can't catch up to you. He's the only character in the game that you can say that about. Whereas Chic, her strong point is that she has better like close quarters frame data. You know, her forward tilt being frame 5 is really good at dealing with Spacey's pressure. But the thing is, Fox's frame data is ultimately unparalleled. So like you don't want to beat Fox in that niche. Your character can't be better than Fox in the frame data niche. So it's better to just outrun him. Like that advantage that Falcon has is more valuable in the Fox matchup. But the reason Chic's frame data is really good in the Falco matchup is because Falco's actually a lot more sluggish. And Chic's frame data and like how nimble she is, those things are able to contest Falco really well. So it's totally fine to contest Falco in the frame data niche, but Fox, you know, that's just like a lost cause. So it's better to take Falcon's advantages into Fox, and it's better to take Chic's advantages into Falco. And then by virtue of Fox being a better character than Falco, Captain Falcon gets the higher placement than Chic. There's also other things like the fact that Captain Falcon is much better into Jigglypuff. That matchup's like even, whereas Chic loses to Puff. And then Chic also has a random loss to Ice Climbers, whereas Captain Falcon destroys that character. So I actually think Falcon ends up higher than Chic nowadays. However, Falcon does lose to Chic, to be clear. I think it's like 45-55. Falcon loses to Chic without a doubt, but like I said, I'm looking more at these other matchups, especially the S tier. And Falcon's actually the best overall character in the game against Fox and Marth, other than Falco. So he gets the next spot. He's able to hang on really well in like the end game metagame. So now, the next thing about my tier list is that I actually think Melee, for the most part, is a 5-character game. I think right now, these 5 characters are basically the good characters, and anything below this is disadvantaged. Like, the character's not, you know, they're not bad. If you make it on this list, then the character's not bad. But I actually think if you're not using one of these 5 characters, then your chances of winning, like especially a major, are pretty slim nowadays. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say that about Jigglypuff, but Jigglypuff, in my opinion, actually doesn't go in these tiers anymore. And that's mostly because, like I said, my tier list would be heavily based on how the character fares against Fox and Marth. Jigglypuff is 40-60 into both of those characters. So, Captain Falcon into Fox is like 45-55, and then he's like 5-5 into Marth, and then he's like 4-6 into Falco. Chic is like 4-6 into Fox, 5-5 into Marth, 45-55 into Falco. So like their aggregates against this S tier are pretty good. Like they can hang on. But Puff, in my opinion, has a double 4-6. She's 4-6 into Fox, and she's 4-6 into Marth. So the fact that she's the first character on the list that has a double 4-6 into the characters who are probably the 2 best characters in the game means, in my opinion, she can't go here anymore. Like, she actually can't go in this tier, and her odds of winning are pretty slim. Because she's hitting these 2 matchups constantly, and it really is starting to feel like for Puff to beat, like, an expert level player with these 2 characters, it kind of requires a lot of misplaying on their part. Like, she just gets worse and worse as the game goes on. I could actually see her dropping below this point. But for now, I'm totally fine with giving her this spot, because she does have some really oppressive matchups, such as Peach. Peach, I'll put her in the same tier. I think Peach's chances of winning are trash. She's got a bunch of 4-6s. She's got the 4-6 into Fox, 4-6 into Marth, 4-6 into Falcon. Damn, she's probably 4-6 into Chic as well. She's fine into Falco. That one could actually be like even, but other than that, her matchup spread is very bad. But the reason I still put Peach here is because she is so broken into these 4 characters. She's like maybe the most oppressive character in the game into these 4. Just because they just cannot kill her. These characters are just like not built to deal with Peach. Like, she's actually really oppressive into the characters that are lower on the tier list. Same with this tier. Like, Peach is probably... She could be the absolute most broken character in the game against a lot of the characters on this list. They just can't kill her, and, you know, she's got ridiculous frame data. But the characters that are really high on the tier list are very well equipped for dealing with those things, and she kind of just falters. Like, she's the only character on this list whose neutral game is actually bad against Puff's neutral game. Like, all 5 of these characters destroy Puff in the neutral game, but Peach doesn't. Back air almost invalidates Peach. That's why a lot of Peach players consider this to be her worst matchup, because she's just too slow to deal with it. She can't weave around it. She can't catch up to a Puff that's drifting away from her. So that's like her major roadblock. But other than that, her spread is really bad. That being said, she's still too good to be grouped with some of these other characters. So I give her a B tier spot. The next placement may surprise you. I'm actually going to put Yoshi in the same tier as Puff and Peach. And the reason I say this is because Yoshi is a shockingly underrated character. Like, when I think about who's solo mainable, like who could win a major, I cannot rule out Yoshi. I don't feel that Yoshi really gets invalidated to the same degree that some of these these 3 characters that I'm about to list do. And on top of that, I think his potential is insane. I think he's probably still the most untapped character in the game. It's not out of the question, believe it or not, that he rises to like number 6. It's completely not out of the question, because I think Puff and Peach can be relegated. Like, these 2 characters, I just don't see how they're ever going to go back into being like really good solo main territory. I don't see how it's possible, but Yoshi is so untapped, you know, between his super armor and parry mechanics. Whenever I play Amsa, I actually feel that if he theoretically like optimized, you know, like if this character theoretically got optimized, it just can't be ruled out. He's got like his own, you know, 20xx thing going on where he could go up for sure. But right now, I'm going to put him in this tier because I actually think he's completely solo mainable. I think he's got bad matchups for sure. He's probably like 4-6 into like Falcon, Fox, Peach. But if a really skilled player, you know, like masters this character in theory, I kind of fear where it could go. So I'm going to give him a B tier spot. Now, next up, Ice Climbers. Ice Climbers are so they've got 2 winning matchups. They actually beat Chic. So out of these 5 characters, these top 5, Chic is the only one who actually loses a matchup to a character in this C tier. And she loses to Ice Climbers because she's just not built to separate Nana. Especially on FD. That matchup's probably like 7-3 or something. So they've actually got 2 winning matchups. Their winning matchups are Chic and Pikachu. They're great into those 2 characters, but they're terrible elsewhere. Like, they're just a complete gimmick into characters like Fox, Marth, Captain Falcon, Peach. I don't think they're as bad into Puff as people say they are. I think, assuming Puff's like stalling rules are limited, then they should be fine. If stalling rules are permitted, then yeah, there's a problem here. But Puff, in theory, needs to have like anti-stalling rules placed on her. You shouldn't just be able to drift from the platforms from side to side the moment that you take a lead and, you know, win the game that way. For similar reasons that there needs to be a ledge grab limit. So I don't think they're as bad into Puff as people say, but they're horrible into like 4 of these other characters. And because of that, on top of the fact that I don't really see a way to fix the fact that Nana is highly exploitable, I give them a C tier position. I don't really think it's possible to win. Like, C tier basically means you can't win with them. Like, they're not, you know, they're not a shit character like these characters are, but I don't think you can win with them anymore. I still give them this position, though, because they do beat Chic, and they also beat Pikachu, who is going to be the next character up on this list. Pikachu gets the 10th place position. I think Pikachu is not aging very well. The more that I fight this character, I don't know, the more he just kind of feels like a low tier to me. That being said, he can hold his own in like the higher variance matchups, like Fox, Falcon, and Marth. He has really good Gimp game on these characters, and so he can absolutely steal wins from these characters. Like I don't think he loses to any of these by more than 6-4, just because the matchups are so high variance, and he's able to delete their stocks really effectively. But he basically gets invalidated by Puff, basically gets invalidated by Peach. So those are 2 huge roadblocks. Basically gets invalidated by Ice Climbers. So you're looking at 3 characters that basically say it's probably impossible to win with Pikachu at this point. So you need an insane amount of bracket luck, I think, to make this happen. I think his days are pretty numbered, but he's still definitely like top 11 because he's playable. He's very playable into Fox, Marth, and Falcon, and those are 3 of the top 4 characters in the entire game. So that's actually really good. He's worse versus characters further down on the list than he is against characters that are high up on the list, which is really unusual. That being said, he's got those really bad roadblocks, so I think Pikachu is not doing too hot nowadays or going forward. And then lastly, you got Samus. So Samus, I really only have one thing to say about her. She's the last character in the game who doesn't lose to Fox by more than 4-6. So what I mean by that is all these characters in the F tier, they lose to Fox by more than 4-6. You're at this point, like any of these characters, you're looking at 35-65 or worse. Most of these characters are worse. Like most of these characters, you're looking at like 30-70, maybe even worse than that. But Samus is 4-6 into Fox. If you're 4-6 into Fox, you make it on the list, basically. That's like her merit. That's why like a lot of Fox players have historically struggled versus her despite the tier list gap. But she ultimately is just so bad into so many of the other characters on the list, like Marth, Falcon, Chic, Puff, Peach. I think Samus is impossible to win with. I think it's literally impossible. Like Ice Climbers, it's not impossible. Pikachu, it's not impossible. I think Samus, you're basically already looking at impossible. But I have to separate her from the rest of the pack because she's got that decent Fox matchup. So that's really good. Other than that, she doesn't have too much going for her. But yeah, that's my current tier list. I think the placements, the most notable placements here are Captain Falcon has gone up. I think he's actually solidly number 4 right now, which is the highest I've ever placed him. Puff is extremely overrated on this list. This was back when people didn't know the Puff matchup, and when people didn't really realize that Puff's actually got a really bad aggregate into Fox and Marth, and those are your top 2, almost without a doubt. So she's actually not that great anymore, in my opinion, and I think she only gets worse from here. Like, it's actually not out of the question for Yoshi to go up. I'm not even kidding. I think Yoshi's got a better chance than Puff or Peach to become, like, I don't know about this good, but to become, you know, like the 6th best solo main. So Puff needs to be lowered for sure. Peach placement is fine. People have been agreeing for a while that Peach is number 7. She's like kind of locked in there right now. Yoshi, sleeper character, watch out for him, like I said. These 3, forget it. I think your days are kind of numbered, but they're playable. They're playable. And then these characters are basically not. They're basically not in a part of the game anymore. So I think this is the tier list right now. Curious to hear what everybody has to say. Thanks for watching.